Buenos días, mis amigos. Guten Tag. Всем привет. Bonjour. Hello. Yo estudié español durante 3 años en la escuela secundaria. Ich habe ein Jahr lang Deutsch an der Universität studiert, aber jetzt lerne ich alleine. Русский очень сложный. Я был в России в прошлом году и все еще учусь. Et je veux apprendre le français à l'avenir.
Hey guys, it's Jordan. Welcome back to my channel and welcome language enthusiasts. If you're new here, hello, my name's Jordan. I make lifestyle and music content here on YouTube. If you want to stick around, feel free to hit that subscribe button. And if you love learning languages, hit that thumbs up button and comment what languages you speak below. A little bit about my background and experience learning languages. Like most Americans, I started learning a second language in high school. I took 3 years of formal education in Spanish, and that's really where I fell in love with learning languages and like really diving into my love for communication with other people. I just remember being in class and getting so excited about like learning new vocabulary and conjugations so that I could potentially like understand what people were saying around me if they were speaking in Spanish, and then being able to call a door like la puerta or a window la ventana, like just random things. I just like, well, I can speak Spanish, so I'm gonna call it by its Spanish name. I actually got so excited about learning languages and felt like at that point like I was doing pretty good on Spanish, and shifted my focus my freshman year of college to German, where I took a year of German because we had a language requirement and I wanted to learn something new. I remember struggling through that year and being like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this. I kept mixing things up with Spanish, but eventually after many meetings with the TA, I like grew to love the language. Last year I actually went to Russia and got to spend some time over there meeting people and helping out with a church camp, and that was so impactful for me that I wanted to make sure that before I went that I could communicate at least a little bit. So I spent quite a bit of time like learning vocabulary and learning basic phrases to say so that when I met people, like I was able to communicate somewhat. And I remember the people over there were so excited about me wanting to learn Russian that they were more than willing to teach me if they knew a little bit of English. And if you don't know, I was actually a music major in college. I studied classical voice, so I was always having to sing Italian arias from different operas, French and German art songs. Ultimately, my experience doing that has really just fueled my love for language learning, and eventually I really want to learn French, but I've told myself that I will not learn French until I'm at least fluent in 1 or 2 of the other languages, but it's an everyday progression to get better, so I can't expect to learn a language in one night. So I just thought I'd share with you some things that I like to do to help me learn these languages and help me be on my way to my goal of fluency. My first tip would be to keep a notebook. Keep a journal of everything, where you write your vocabulary, where you have your grammar lessons, where you're just constantly writing things down and keeping everything organized in one little book. I find it to be so helpful because then you can flip back through and see like what you've already done and even go and review, and it's all in one place. I like the system of having a journal or a notebook to go back to because in the long run it makes it easier to review and see what you've already learned and test yourself, and also remind yourself of those grammatical cases and conjugations that you're not 100% sure of because you've already written the lesson out. My next tip, I know a lot of people have said, but it is so helpful to put your phone in your target language. Right now, my phone is in Spanish just because that's what I'm trying really hard to just work at and be better at. So I went ahead and changed the language of my phone to Spanish so that I'm able to start recognizing some of the phrases and words that I use on a daily basis. What's really cool that I've noticed is if you're scrolling through Instagram and you hit the little translate button, for me, all of my friends are posting in English most of the time, but I can also translate it so that it will read in Spanish. So then I basically have this free side-by-side service where I can look at something in English, translate it to Spanish, and then see how those two things correlate. So I would encourage you, if you already know a little bit of the basics of whatever language you're trying to learn, change your phone into that language so that you're able to start connecting the dots between your native language and the language you're trying to learn. My third tip would be to find a good dictionary that you can go back to if you don't know what a word is. So this can be a physical book. I have this book that I got in high school for one of my Spanish classes, and I'm always going back to it if there's just a word that I want to know or a word that I forgot, just kind of looking up and seeing what that is. Nowadays, it's super easy to just go online and see what something is, so take full advantage of those online resources as well. Another thing that I would suggest is, because your phone is typically with you all the time and in your pocket, using apps as a resource. Now, I would not recommend using Duolingo as your sole source of learning material, just because it doesn't really teach you proper grammar. It just kind of gives you phrases, but it's a great way to review. Spending 5 minutes a day on Duolingo isn't going to teach you a new language, but it will help you practice a language. I also like this app called Drops, which I use for Russian, which really helps me do vocabulary practice. There's all these little fun matching things that you can do and pictures, so it's very visual. It's something that I found really helpful in learning vocabulary, but again, I don't use these as my sole resources to learn a language. My next suggestion is, in your notebook or your journal or even on your phone, keep a list of new vocabulary and colloquial phrases that you hear, even just figures of speech. I remember when I was in Russia, this was the #1 thing that I would do. I'd always be asking my friends, what did you just say, or how do I say this? And I would write it down and keep it in my phone. And that's how I learned just some basic things to communicate with people. Like, I learned that "Молодец" is good job or well done. I learned that "Классно" is cool, or even "Классно круто," which is like cool. And that's something that I found really helpful, especially when I was really around only native speakers. I could always go back to this list and see, like, oh, so this is how I respond to this, and this is how I would say this. Probably my favorite tip is to listen to music in the language that you're trying to learn. In my Spotify playlist, I definitely have like random German, French, and Spanish songs sprinkled throughout my playlist. A, because it's good music, and B, because it really helps me learn the language. I love going and looking at the lyrics online and then translating them to English to see what I already know and if there's any new vocabulary or new phrases that I can learn from that. I just find it's such a fun way to learn music, and then you're in the car and you're singing along to some new French song and you're just kind of impressing your friends because you're like, oh yeah, I'm fluent, I can sing this song. I would also suggest looking for movies and TV shows in your target language so that you can sit and watch and study them. This is a fun thing to do, however, it's not just passive watching, it is active watching. So you are listening to the language, you are writing things down. To study a particular movie, I sit down and watch it like 3 times. First time with like English audio if it's there, just so that I get an understanding of what's going on. The second time with the original audio and English subtitles, just so now I can start hearing the language and then matching what's going on with the words that I hear. And then I listen to it one more time in the original language with its original subtitles. Now you're able to identify words and phrases and really get a better handle on what the language is. We're so fortunate nowadays to have access to Netflix, Hulu, Amazon Prime, and all these other streaming services where we can actually sit down and watch foreign films and foreign TV shows. Another huge component of learning a language is being able to read it. So we have tons and tons of access to resources online. You can always go to your local library, local bookstore, and pick up a book in your target language. I would recommend looking at poetry, short stories, easy novels. I know that there are tons of books that actually have side-by-side translations. So it has, say, like the French translation and then the English translation, and then it's easy to kind of go back and forth. If you did language study in high school at all, you'll know that like in the textbooks there's always these random little short stories and short paragraphs that you have to read. So if you can find a textbook, that's awesome. If not, go online and see if you can find any resources like that where you can practice your reading comprehension. Something that I like to do around the house and like with my friends, which kind of annoys my parents sometimes, is like saying random phrases in whatever language. So I'll say something in Spanish, I'll say something in German, or I'll ask like, what's that? If in Russian. That way you start to practice speaking it and practice your everyday speaking habits in those language. And when I do this, I really like to focus on my pronunciation just so that I don't have a thick American accent. And I really want to get my accent as close to a legitimate speaker. Probably the most difficult part but most important part of learning a language is learning grammar. So I would suggest getting yourself a proper textbook that you can look through and learn all of the grammatical cases. But even nowadays, there are so many great online resources, though you may have to do some digging to find like which resources are actually good resources. But utilizing multiple resources at once is actually very helpful, because if you don't understand the way something is explained in one textbook or in one reading, maybe somebody online will explain it better, and vice versa. So I think it's super important to kind of have multiple different grammatical resources to go back to, because that is probably the main brunt of actually speaking and understanding a language. Since you're already here on YouTube, why not watch some videos that are in the language that you're trying to learn? I find them really helpful to actually spend time learning about the culture and the history and the place where your language that you're learning is native to. You can also find YouTubers that actually make videos in the languages that you're trying to learn and then watch with subtitles if they're available to you, or even test your listening skills and seeing what you can actually pick up from those. One of the biggest tips that I have for you is to find a native speaker and to practice with them, or at least practice with somebody that is also learning that language. But I found that if you are practicing with a native speaker, you are able to catch on to the language a lot quicker, and they're able to help correct things and guide things, and you're able to learn accents by getting on like a FaceTime call with them, or even texting them and practicing writing it out, and then they can totally help you just like master the language. And not only are you working on like your personal language skills, but your communication skills, because that's what language is for. It's used to communicate. So why not practice actually communicating with a friend who speaks that language so that you get that practical application? If you don't have any friends that are actually native speakers or from that country, from that area, you can always find resources online. I know that like 10 years ago it was still kind of sketchy to meet people online, but nowadays meeting people online is so common that there are so many Facebook groups that you can join where you can reach out and like try to practice the language with somebody. So look at Facebook, check out online communities. I'm sure you're gonna find somebody to help you practice that language. If you can't find a friend to help you, you can always find an online tutor that you pay to help fix some of your grammar errors, and then also practice speaking and hearing the language with them. My next tip is one that I understand that not everybody can do on a frequent basis, nor can people really do right now due to the current circumstances of the world. But in the future, when travel opens up, go to the country that the language that you're trying to learn is native. I found that my language learning really accelerated when I was actually having to hear it all the time and communicate with people and try to understand what they were saying or order food. And that's really where I gained a lot of my practical experience, is actually being immersed in that language. So maybe make it a point to save up so you can go on a trip and go practice that language. My last tip for you is do a little bit of language study every single day, whether that's a half hour, an hour, or 2 hours in a day. Make time to immerse yourself in the language every single day. Even if you're just in the car listening to music or wanting to watch Netflix for a little bit, maybe spend some time like intentionally trying to learn. What it does is it constantly keeps you exposed to that language, so that just a little bit every day can help you become fluent in the future, and you're constantly reminding yourself of the things that you've learned so that you can further your progress. Well, that's it, guys. Those are all my language tips for you. Best of luck in your language learning. I know that I will be working really hard on mine. Again, comment down below what language you want to learn, and if you have any tips that I didn't mention. If you like this video, don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. I'll catch you later.